Bush Light Lime, what do you guys think?
Solid.
I like it.
Yep. It reminds me of being on a boat, being on the beach,
Summary.
burning my skin.
Yep.
Summary.
This is a summer cocktail. And I tell you what, I've had a couple of them in some of the hottest. It has been brutal. And man, this was, I took one the other day and just boom, zip, it just went straight down. Like, oh, so good. Refreshing.
Well, speaking of public lands, I mean,
sat down.
growing up, you throw beer on state land. That's what we used to call it in Michigan. That's what we still call it, state land. That's where our parties happened.
Oh, yeah.
So we would bring the Bush Lights in the middle of state land, start a fire up at Grimm. And there's a ton of property in Estee, up in Gladwin County. That's where we used to party. And we'd bring the beer, we'd get wood, we'd make the fires, and the cops would show up. Every time.
Every time.
And it's before cell phones, so it's not like, hey, I saw a cop, he's heading your way. It was just like, there's a flashlight over your shoulder. Hey, Jason, how are you? I'm like, let's run. And you'd run in the woods and they'd never catch you. The girls would get caught more than the guys. But, but it was like one, they'd catch like one or two, giving them MIP, and they were kind of like the token MIP, and you stop for the day.
Comes down to the big, beautiful bill. That's what it all comes down to. So,
I just know that there's this Mike Lee character, this senator. And the last thing that I saw was a video where they were getting ready to vote, and this is like wee hours of the night. It was introduced at like 11:30 p.m.
Slipped in.
The entire bill that they were looking at was like 54 pages. There was a 33-page bill introduced at like 11:30 at night that was like, here, this is on selling lands. It was like that kind of thing. It's like, it's tried to sneak it under the radar, and obviously a lot of stuff got.
What was proposed was 3 million acres of federal land. That's not small.
It's not small.
That is not small. It's 3 million acres of federal land across federal land, BLM. You know, there's different ownerships. A lot of federal land, but who owns it is a little bit different all the way across the board. And as of yesterday, so you know, and in some ways, this is kind of how this whole thing's supposed to work. Probably before you put the bill up for a vote, but I mean, there's an uproar. Everybody out there in the hunting community stepped up. You know, because out west, obviously, even through the Midwest, but especially out west, public lands are huge. For a lot of people, that's the only access that they have, and so hunters united on a front all the way across the country. And he came out yesterday. Mike Lee did, as of yesterday. I haven't seen the latest updates today, if there is any, but he came out yesterday and he addressed hunters like specifically and was like, "Listen, you spoke. I hear exactly what you're saying. It was wrong, I was wrong, and we're going to try to figure out a way to do this to where it's actually right, but we can accomplish both sides." So, I mean, they're saying they want to use it as a debt mechanism, basically to pay down some of the debt, like satisfy some of the debt. But 3 million acres. So yesterday his whole thing was, okay, so now we're going to exclude all federal lands. So if it's federally owned, not necessarily like BLM, we'll exclude all federal lands. BLM land outside of, I think, 5 miles from like a major metro, anything outside of 5 miles is not eligible to be sold. So it's like within 5 miles it could be sold. And then he's talking about this whole trying to create freedom zones, which is like, I haven't seen a ton of detail on it, but like in perpetuity kind of stuff. Kind of like the Mason Tract up on the South Branch. You know, that guy owned, what, 1,400 acres, I think, and left it all to be left in perpetuity. So that's the latest, is this guy actually stepped up to the plate. So the big question is, like, when it comes to, you know, public lands and public access, like, just how do you guys feel about that in general? Because on one hand, as Americans, owning land is like the American dream, and being able to own land and do your own thing. But on the other hand, if you don't have land or you don't have the means to own land, then public land is obviously a huge resource for you. So
I think well, first of all, if it's a debt mechanism, at $10,000 an acre, $3 million or 3 million acres is only $30 billion. And that's at $10,000 an acre. And $30 billion, you might think, well, that could pay down some debt. I mean, we make.
That's interest in a day.
The time I can sit here and fart, and by the time the fart's over, we spent $30 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
Long
the
fart.
amount of money we spend as a country. That how much did we give to whoever, the countries over the years that we've just given them?
Yeah.
Billions of dollars that just is wasted. So yeah, I mean, public lands, again, I think from Michigan, we don't have the amount of public land, I think, that you do out west. I mean, out west, you're hunting big animals, you're hunting elk, you're hunting mule deer, a lot of that stuff. I mean, public land, you have to have that to kill an elk out there. Yeah. I mean, unless you go through an outfitter, but the public land, you can go out there and do it yourself. I mean, that's what we like to do, DIY stuff. So for me, I think there wasn't a lot of voice. I didn't hear a lot of voices in Michigan, not as many as you'd hear out west. Yeah. Because that is a part of their day. Yep. They go out west, they spend a lot of their time on public land. I mean, there is a lot of it out there. Yep. Here in Michigan, we have some great public access properties. DNR, I've killed turkeys on state land. I've shot a lot of ducks on state land. I've never shot a deer on state land, but a lot of people do. Yep. And a lot of people depend on it, and you'd hate to see that property, that opportunity for somebody who doesn't have the ability to hunt any private land taken away from them, to create a little revenue for a government that wastes millions and millions and billions of dollars, our money, all the time. So let's take more away from us. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Isn't there a better way? Yeah. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way to generate revenue to pay down debt.
I think as a revenue generator, I think that's a terrible excuse. Terrible. I think it was, I don't know about that portion. I do know that I mean, for me, it's a preservation thing. I mean, when we have our federal lands, state lands, BLM, all the different types of lands that are open to the public, regardless, and we're not just talking about hunting rights. I mean, camping and fishing and exploring and hiking and the things that we can do. This is preservation of this. Otherwise, it just ends up in contractors' hands, ends up being housing, and we just start crushing things. And that whole thing carries over to, herd health of elk out west start to diminish because they don't have the place to go, winter and all. Yeah. And so for me, it's not just about the hunting rights. I mean, it's kind of like, look, this is our land, right? It's part of America. It's a federal land, it's government, but we're all allowed to use it. And I think, there's a lot more people that would use that than have their own land that they can hunt, in my opinion. I don't know if that's a true fact or a fact or not, but I feel like there's for me, we don't own land in Montana. So I would be going to a public place to hunt it, but I do have land in Michigan. And so it's there are things that we can go back and forth on, but I just think it's integral for preservation and conservation, just to save this pristine nation. It pisses me off that they're like, well, let's just sell that off.
Yeah.
To what? I mean, for what?
Yeah, for what?
Yeah, I mean, and for the end goal of saying, well, we ran the country shitty, and I just want to be able, I ran my state shitty, so I want to sell that so I can just make up for what I ran shitty. Yeah. That's the part that doesn't sit well with me, is hey, we have this beautiful thing over here we're going to use as a debt collector. We're just going to, let's sell that off and pay for our mistakes.
It should be sacred.
Run better.
It should be sacred.
It should be.
Us,
it should be
that public. And
now there are things, like you said, within 5 miles and infrastructure, but you start to think, when does 5 miles become the next 5 miles? It's you do that, and then 5 miles later there's another one, and then 5 miles later there's another one, and it just they get around it somehow, some way, and they start to kind of think about that, and they're like, that's fine, in 15 years that'll be within 5 miles of that city, and then we'll sell that off. And so I get it, but I do think there are just places that should never be touched.